Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and we work on Django apps on this stream. Tonight, we're going to continue on my homeschooling app that I've been building out and working on a brand new page that's been requested by one of my trialing users. So if that sounds interesting, you'll see hopefully the entire page lifecycle from nothing to something. I don't know how far we'll get, but we'll try and make as much progress as we can. I do want to thank my patrons, and if you want to support me on Patreon, you can at patreon.com/mblehman. Every little bit helps, so there's a good way to help me support and pay for things that I do, like podcasts and other things for the Django community. But I want to thank my patrons of Rupert and Andrew, Abdulaziz, Patrick, Mark, and Philip and Eric. Thank you very much for your continued help and support. It's really awesome. So this is a stream all about doing Django development. So you're free to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development in general. And if you're catching this stream later on YouTube, please do me a favor and like and comment and just have a dialogue. I do check out all the comments. I try to respond to all that I can. And I appreciate that support because it's a good way to get some visibility on YouTube. So please do that if you're over there catching this recording later on. Let's get into this feature that we're going to work on tonight. So the plan is to work on a brand new feature that was requested by one of my members that is trialing. And if you've never joined the stream before, I work on a homeschool application. It's a homeschool application that I use and create for my spouse primarily, but with the idea in mind to make it available to users. And I've done that recently, and I'm starting to have some users come into the app and on a whim, I just reached out to one of them and said, hey, I see you've actually done things in the app, because I have an onboarding page that kind of tracks, not like the specifics. I'm not really interested in what their kids are doing or anything. I just want to know, are you actually doing anything in the app? And one person stuck out, and contacted this individual and got a ton of good feedback. And one of the pieces of feedback that she responded with was, what can I do about making additional features? And that's exactly what I want, because I'm at the stage where I don't know if I'm offering all the features that everybody needs. And her bit of feedback was, hey, I'm in a state that actually requires that I track attendance for my students as a homeschooler. It's a legal requirement in states in the United States for some states, but it's not a requirement for me in my home state. So this is something that I had not considered adding. I think I had seen it elsewhere, but I didn't know how big of a deal it was. And to get this person to stay interested and hopefully eventually convert, I said, yeah, I can absolutely build something like that, because it's not a terribly hard feature from my perspective. So I outlined all of the things that I think would make that feature work, and I said, does this look good to you? I wanted their direct feedback, and she wrote back and said, yeah, that's perfect. It does exactly what she would need. And so that's what I've documented here in this issue. This is the literal text that I sent in my email to her, copied over to GitHub, so it formatted a little weird, but you can see that these are the things that we need to implement in this to kind of satisfy what she's looking for. Now, I suspect that over time, there will be additional changes that might come into it. I have a couple in mind that might happen, or I can kind of anticipate as future customer requests. But for today, I'm going to try and implement the thing that she asked for and do two things about that. Like, I want to use this to my advantage of, this is a brand new chunk of functionality, and it applies to anybody who is in a state like this customer's. And I actually don't know how many states are affected by this requirement to track attendance, but I imagine there are a few. So I want to implement the feature, but then also write a blog post as a kind of a marketing and do content marketing, because I have a product blog. So the School Desk app has a blog, and they're little short posts to say, like, here's functionality that I've added. So someone can go view these things and click on them and see what these new features are. Really, I don't anticipate a lot of people are actually coming to this page. I just want it there for SEO purposes, that Google and the crawlers and all of those things will start to notice that, hey, attendance and homeschool planning go together when mentioned with School Desk. So that's some of my ulterior motive here, I guess. But it's just good to highlight the features. So this is what we're going to build. The feature itself is not super complicated. It's really about a report saying Here's every day that is in this student's school year, and here's whether they attended or not. And the attended, what I'm going to be marking as attended is, did the student complete any task that day? So that makes it pretty easy to check, did they do it or not? There are a couple other wrinkles in there that sometimes there are holidays in the schedule, which I have called breaks that's the name of the model in the Django model. And we need to fill in those dates. So first pass of this is going to be, can I print out a report that shows every day of the school year and lists out the date? I might even list in the actual day of the week, because I think that starts to indicate to the users that, okay, here's clearly the weekend. Here's Saturday and Sunday, which most people aren't going to run their school year on. And by showing that, it might give a better indicator. So we need to get that table of that listing of dates, and that's kind of step one. And then we want to fill it in with the information of, this is the student, this is, they either did something or didn't do something, and so we need to get a list of the dates and the list of the work and combine them all together and go from there. So that's the plan. Let's work on that. All right, so I had to restart my computer because stuff was going wrong, but I'm back in business here, so I'm getting a fresh new terminal, and we're going to use Vim. That's my editor of choice, and we're going to go to the section that I have reports. So there is a report URLs pie, which is where I have reports, and I've been thinking about the way that I've structured this so far, and I'm realizing that it's kind of dumb. And it's kind of dumb because there's some stuff in here that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I mean from the existing URLs that are here. And I'm going to change something about this, and we'll see what that is in just a moment. Let's look at one of the existing views to hopefully make it make more sense. So at the bottom of this file, I have the reports. And I've been thinking about changing this, but it's adequate for now. So we've got this progress report, which is an indicator of everything the student has done. And we've also got a resource report, which is all of the materials that a student has, or someone has created for a particular class. But as I've been thinking about this, like, one of the common elements of this is that I need to marry together the student and the school year that they're part of. And so let's actually take a look at this from the browser so we can see what this looks like. So I'm gonna get rid of the actual the main website so I don't confuse myself. We'll go to localhost and go to port 5000 and check out the page. So what does this look like in reality? So that right now we have this reports page. And there are things about this that I already want to change. Like, I've been thinking through this, and I'm going to add a third report. I'm already on a reports page, so this labeling of progress report and resource report seems kind of dumb. I can probably drop the word report. So that's one change we'll make the index page. But the important thing to note about this set of reports is it's always going to be in this viewpoint of, this is the student, and this is the grade level that the student was in for a certain year. So the way that this index page is built out is it's a list of every time a student is in a school year. And I've shown the modeling diagram before, and I'll show it again. But I have a model that represents this. And so I'm going to open that file. It's the models.py file. So it's a generated file that shows all of the models in my system. And the thing that represents is a student in a school year is this model right here. It's called an enrollment. And so the enrollment is a model that you can kind of trace together. I don't know how well you can read that. I'll zoom in one more time. But you can see that there is a foreign key to a student and a foreign key to a grade level. And if you follow the tree down, this big tree of stuff, the grade level connects to the school year. So when I have my URLs file that we were just looking at a second ago, it's got a UUID and it's got a student and a student UUID. But this is really dumb. Like, why am I looking up both a school year and a UUID when I already have, by definition, a model with a unique identifier that will identify that student in that school year. It's the enrollment UUID. So this dawned on me the other day. I might eventually change these particular URLs, but I'm going to use this to our advantage for this new view. So that's probably where we want to start. We want to look up things through the enrollment and then build up from there, because it all centers back to, is the student in the grade level for the year. And so let's probably start with a test. How about that? That's a good place to usually start. We'll go to the schools app, which we're already in, and we'll bring up the test views file. And there's probably already a report stuff down at the bottom here, if I'm being consistent, which it seems that I am, which is good. And we will essentially take from this first case here and just use that as the basis for the next one. In fact, there's some good checking that is good to have in all of these, because something that's important in this app is I'm not separating the databases out. Like, each user is not getting their own database. So I always have to be careful with, is the user that's making the request authorized to actually see this chunk of data? And the way that I do that is checking of, does that user own the particular school? The school is actually the core model of this whole thing. We can see it. Where did it go? So school is somewhere. There's school year. Here it is. So the school model right here is like the root of the tree in this homeschool system. The user that logs in, everything, all of their data is contained with the school as the hub, and every access kind of hinges off of that. So if you trace down, it works. I could flip this model diagram, and it works as like a directed acyclic graph. So you start with a school and you can look up. And so if I give you, or if a user gives the website an enrollment UUID, I can look up and say, well, does this logged in user, if I walk up the tree, do they own the school? And if they don't, then I can say, well, you can't access this page. So that's a kind of test that I include in basically every view that I build. I want to make sure that access control is really important to me, and I don't want to screw that up. So I include that in test in all of my other stuff. So here we go. We've got the test resource report view, and we're going to change this to be the attendance report view. So we'll change it to attendance, like so. And the next thing to do is to change this from reports to attendance. Now this doesn't exist yet, so we're writing stuff that will fail, but that's okay. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to change this. Like you can see, here's an example where I was just talking about, where I was looking up two separate pieces of information, which is just dumb. I can replace this instead with an enrollment and use the enrollment factory, which the enrollment has a UUID, so I should be able to use that no problem. And then I can change this to be enrollment UUID. And when I do that, I'm going to get the benefits that I'm looking for, which is to say that I'm still going to be able to get the student. I'm going to be able to get the school year. Both pieces will come along for the ride when I fetch the enrollment from the database. But now I have one unique identifier. And I think that's going to clean up the URL significantly. If you look at the URLs for my previous reports, I'm using full UUIDs, which I've been thinking, like, do I want to do that in the future? But I'm doing it for now. But it just makes for these ridiculously long URLs where it's like reports or schools and some UUID, and then report on resources and then some other UUID, and it just seems really dumb. And yeah, in fact, as I say this out loud, I'm concerned that I might be getting it wrong. Yeah, this is totally going to break if you have multiple school years, because check it out. No, it'll work for a school year. It's where it's going to break. Yeah, so it's fine. It's just not optimal. I was getting worried there for a second that I really messed things up, but I'm doing okay. because a user can only be in a single grade level in a school year. You can't be in multiple. So the constraint of school year and student is a working pair. But we can make something simpler, which is what we're doing here. And so we've got a test here, and I'm going to run this test, and it's going to blow up because it's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no UURL. Oh, interesting. There's also no UUID. Well, didn't anticipate that, which maybe was why I wrote those other things with the expectation that I needed both pieces of information. That's curious. Okay, well, let's take a detour because this is something that I want to exist in the system. So we need all of these enrollments to have a UUID. And now we're talking about some interesting model migration because stuff doesn't have a UUID today, so we need one. Okay, so this, how complicated do we want to get? So I'm thinking like part of me is wearing a work hat, and part of me is thinking like this is side project in easy mode. So here's the deal. There's a big difference between zero downtime deployments versus some downtime. Is a very different process. Whenever you're thinking about database migrations, that's really where my brain is right now. Okay, so we're all on the same page. When you're thinking about database migrations, a database, if you're adding new fields and you want to do that carefully, but it makes a big difference on how up do you expect your application to be. If you want to add a new column, we're thinking about, here's what I'm really dancing around. We're thinking about adding this column. So it's an enrollment and the field is a UUID. That's what we want to add. It seems to be missing on this model. I don't know why I didn't include that. I should probably just include it for all of my models, but I didn't. But a UUID is a UUID. It's a universally unique identifier. And if we create this on the database, we have to also, if for every existing enrollment record that exists in the database, go into each of those and give them a UUID. So if you use a default on the Django model, if we add this, which I'm planning to do, what's going to happen is with your migration, it will add a UUID, or I believe it should, and they should all be different. We need to make sure that they're unique as well. But if you do it in the way that I intend to do it, what it will do is it will lock the database table. And if you had a website that got tons of traffic and had to be up all the time, that's really bad. Like my day job is I work at Doctor on Demand, which is a telemedicine company. We have like real patients with doing real medical stuff. And the last thing you want is the service just like going down at some random point in the day whenever the engineering team decides to do a deployment, because they didn't think through the implications of what it means to have your database go down for a period of time. With this site that I'm building right now, I mean, I can count the number of active customers on one hand. So the requirements for my scenario are much different than what it means to be on a just massive site. So I guess that means, what I mean by that, all of that is like, we just need to think about this a little differently as we're going through, and I'd show you the migration that I'm going to add. The implication is that the way I'm going to implement it, you need to understand that there would be downtime in this when I do the database migration. So that's where I need to go. So essentially what we're going to have to do then is this chunk of stuff test file that I just added is not going to be right yet. So we're going to stash these changes for a moment. And I'll give them a name, I guess. Git stash attendance. I don't really need to give it a name. What is it? Save. Oh man. Yeah. Okay. I'll give the stash a name, and that just means it just tells Git to go back to the main checkout and take the changes that you have and store them off to the side for a little while, because we need to do this enrollment change first. And so we want to go to the students models, which is where this is, and we want to take a UUID field like this one and add it to the enrollment model. And let's find the class enrollment. It's at the bottom here. Yeah, you can see we don't have the UUID. So I'm going to put this on here. And we're going to test this in a minute as well. And also go ahead and run the migrations. I actually don't know. This might blow up in my face and say, like, you can't do this. It might not. What's going on? I saved that. Oh, okay. I used the wrong command. Oops. So we wanted to run make migrations to make a new migration file. And yeah, so it did what we wanted it to do. So in the students migrations, we have this new migration, and it's adding a new field, and it's going to do a default. So what it's going to do during the migration is that it will call UUID4 for each of the records in the enrollment table. And it needs to do that because we have not let this field be null. And that's the key, is we're not starting with setting a default value or a nullable field. And if you were doing a zero downtime deployment, so in other words, your database is not allowed to go down during deployment, what you'd have to do is a more complicated dance of saying, first I'm going to add the field and let it be null. Then I'm going to do some kind of side task or population task or database migration. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, to actually go through, and for every record in my database, I need to populate it with a value. And you can do that delayed. So you could do that with a background job. You could do that with going into the shell and just iterating in a loop and calling save after you've deployed it. There's a bunch of ways to do it. And then you could do another migration to remove the nullable constraint and essentially lock the column down so that so that from that point on, everything about that model will always have values. And so, yeah, that's the one path. I'm not going to do that path because, as I said, this isn't going to be a problem. Now, there is some things that I want to check here before I actually migrate this. And the thing that I want to check is, do my existing enrollments, are they going to, I don't remember, they shouldn't, but I want to make sure that the existing enrollments are not going to get the same UUID. Like when the migration happens, they should each get their own. Because I think there is a way, if you do this wrong, like if I was to call, for example, an actual like function, or I think there's a way to set this up that if you did this incorrectly, all of the existing enrollments would get the same UUID, which would be terrible. Like it's not universally unique, so that's not really what you're looking for. So we'll go into the shell and we will check out the enrollment model, which is in the students. So from homeschool.students.models import enrollment. And we've got that. And so now we get the let's get how many are there? Enrollment objects count. I think there should be at least a couple in here. That would be the appropriate test. I just want to make sure there's some. So there's 7 in here. Okay. So now that we have the 7, I've got this created migration, and we want to actually migrate this. Yeah, you got to be careful with these UUID things because they can mess you up. So we're migrating that, and let's check on. Let's go back into the shell. Whoops. Manage shell, and from homeschool. Man, not typing well tonight. students, models, import, enrollment. So I've migrated these, and we're just going to say for e and enrollment objects dot all, and I just want to really confirm that these are in fact, you know, receiving different values. I'm pretty confident they will be, but you know, ooh, okay. Ah, man. All right, fine. So something is wrong. This is where my brain is like, what do I need to do? I don't remember. One of these gotchas of models and stuff, right? It's like, this is, you would expect that this knows how to make a unique for each one. Okay. Well, what do we do next? So default UUID 4 was not the correct path. So it's the right like long-term path, but maybe we just need to do this with some manual task, and maybe that's just good to see. I gotta believe there's another way to do this though. All right. Django add UUID to model default. Okay, let's see what the internet comes up with. So I'm sure there's tons of opinions on the internet here about how to do this. And okay, thanks, Stack Overflow. I didn't do that. Maybe there's some guidance in the Django docs. We'll look at the latest version, or at least the version I'm using. There's really not a lot of information here that kind of hints that it's going to use a new one. The other thing we can do, yeah, how do we want to do this? Well, I'll keep looking at a little bit of docs and see if there's anything else that pops up. Because this might be a couple migrations, and it could be just like good to document this and go through this cycle together and see if we get it right. Because I cannot commit, like the other thing that's important about this is that sometimes migrations have to go out like in a certain serial order. And you can't, like if I did a bunch of migrations all at once, like I guess it could probably work, but yeah, we just need to be careful. Okay. Yep, generate the same UUID. Right. Yeah. Okay, this is what I figured. Well, rats. We have to make this a little bit more complicated than I wanted to. Okay, so let's follow along with a bit of what this person has indicated. I think they're right. So you have to do a couple things. So instead of what I was hoping to do, we're going to do this like in a 3-stage setup here. This person is probably saying the same thing. So really what we want is actually 3 different field alterations all in one. And you can kind of read this as the first thing that they do is, in a single migration, what this person is doing is they're starting with the thing that I said you needed to do. Is like you could make it so that the column allows to be null, which is what this first add field operation does. And that's what we're going to do. We're instead of doing a default and unique equal true like was going to be here, and I think is in, well, I actually don't even have that in the model here, so I probably should have that as well. The person sets it to make it nullable by default, and then runs a chunk of code that actually goes through them all and calculates a UUID for each one, and then does this another alter field to lock the stuff down. And yeah, this approach will work. There's actually a bit of a flaw in here, is that there's a possibility that this will return the same value, but UUID generation is supposed to be that like the heat death of the universe should happen before that, so it's probably an okay thing to assume here, especially given the fact that we're going to like generate four values in a row, because I think it takes into consideration the time. So the downside of this approach, if you had one of those zero downtime websites, is that imagine for instance that your table that you're trying to upgrade is millions of rows, and you've got this run Python call, and you're iterating through them in a loop and saving UUIDs to each one. Well, hey, guess what? You have just locked up your whole site for a long time, because the migration system will lock tables and do transactions, and like you're going to cause yourself a hot mess. So this strategy works, and it's going to work for me, and we're going to do it tonight, but it's something to be aware of, that this is not always the scenario you want to do. All right, so let's return to this, and for the moment, we'll comment out that version of the field, which is the ultimate thing that we want. And what did they put in there? Yeah, they don't even have, it's curious. I don't know where the unique is coming from. Right here. I would think that you'd want that. Okay, anyway. All right, let's get to it. So before we actually, so I want to get rid of this broken column that we added here. I don't want to actually destroy this database, but we want to roll that back. So I want to go manage, migrate. This is the students app, and we want to migrate back to the one migration, which is effectively going to drop the UUID column. So you can see it's unapplying the enroll student to UUID thing, which is good. And now we can come up here and we can safely delete this migration. So it's like it never happened. Okay, coming back over here, we can take our UUID field, and this time we're going to replace it with blank equal true, which is not truly needed for this because there's going to be form stuff involved, but I guess it doesn't hurt. And null equal true. And we're going to do the make migrations command again. So now we've got this new version of this, and you can see it's got the add field and with the blank equal true. So now it's time to add more operations to this list. So we want to add a, what do we want to add? We want to add a run Python command, which is like the function that we saw. And run Python takes the apps and the schema editor. So we'll say, I'm going to say, populate UUID. So it takes apps and schema editor as the two arguments. And we have to pull the model as is shown here. So institution get model. So we have to do something similar. So we're going to say enrollment, and we're going to say apps get model. And the reason you have to do this is it pulls the state of the enrollment model at the time of the migration. So, and what do I mean by that? All right, well, let me finish off. Let me make it so this is valid syntax so that we can at least look at this. So enrollment, the model can change, right, over time. And as we add new fields. So if we can't just go into the actual migration file and say from homeschool students models import enrollment. Why? The reason why is that that's going to always pull the latest definition of the enrollment model. But this is a point in time. This migration exists now, today. And so this is not going to apply to my database 1 year from now when I'm still working on this project. So we cannot just pull in the latest, because if you pull in the latest, then the ORM might expect certain new fields to exist that may not exist when this migration needs to run. So what Django gives us is this apps thing, which allows you to query and say, what was the database state of the enrollment model at this time. So we give it the app label, which is in this case students, and then we say enrollment is the model we're trying to pull out. So that's why we're doing it this way, in case you're curious. And from here we can do the same thing, and we can say for enrollment in enrollment.objects.all. Now, this might not be safe if you had a gigantic table, because all will pull everything into memory at once. I know that this table is small, so I'm doing this because it's the right choice for my project. But again, if you had a huge table, you wouldn't want to use all, because what all will do is store all of the objects in Django's memory space, and that's going to be a problem. So probably what you want to do, if that's your scenario, is use iterator, which is going to be the same effect as all, but it's a little bit slower, but it's a little bit safer from a memory point of view, because what it will do is only keep that chunk or some chunk in memory at a time. I don't know if there's like some blocking in there, or if it's literally just one at a time. So that's a slower process. But for me, I don't really need that, because I only in my production system, I probably only have less than 10 enrollments. So this is really not necessary. It'd be way overkill. So we then say enrollment uuid is a uuid 4. Oops. And then we say enrollment save. So again, this is not the fastest way to do this, maybe. You could probably do update calls, perhaps. There's probably a bunch of ways to do the actual data migration. And then we can come down to the operations list here, and we can say migrations.runPython is the thing that we need to do. And we need to give it, you can see my Vim is giving a hint here of the code callable, and there's a reverse code as well. So we can do populate, and we just give it the name of the function. So populate uuid. And then we can also give it the reverse, which could just be migration. I like to always give it a reverse. This might actually be the default, but you can do, well, what is it? Run Python no op? Yeah. So run Python no op is an empty function, basically, but it's a way of hinting to a reader that if you go backwards, we're not going to do anything. So going forward, we're populating all these UUIDs on the model, but if you go backwards and you're dropping the column, it doesn't matter. There's no operation to do. Okay, so now we've got the add field here, and now we need an alter field. So we need to copy essentially the same chunk of code. It's going to be all the same stuff, but we want to change it to use now a default, because the whole point of this is to, once this is done, is to lock this column down so that it's no longer nullable, and so that every time an enrollment is then created, it's going to give it a unique enrollment ID. So that's what this person is doing here. And in fact, I don't know that, I'm not sure that Django would do this. Yeah, let's see what Django would do actually. So we've got our migration here, and from Django's point of view, we've added the field. That's this. That's our first version. And now I want to change it so that the final destination thing that I want to have is not this version, but this version. So let's see if we make another migration, what's going to happen. It's going to generate a 3, but what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to combine them with this 3 migration, because we can do this all in one fell swoop. So this is the final state that I expect out of this thing. And so you can see here that Django's got an alter field, and it's doing db index in true, but it's not doing, there's no longer the unique equals true. So this is what would have happened. I guess probably I could lock this down so that unique would be true. But again, UUID 4 is supposed to like take into consideration time and all sorts of factors, and the probability of a generated UUID being in conflict is 0. I mean, not truly 0, I guess, but heat death of the universe kind of 0. So yeah, don't real technically need that. So I don't actually want to keep this migration around. What I want to do is come back to the second migration and go to the operations list and paste in, this is the thing that I wanted. So we're pretending as if we did all of this stuff in one operation, but we're really putting it into 3. And we're ending up with a final state of the UUID field, which is what we're really looking for. So I'm going to come back here, and now I'm going to delete this 3 file. Okay, and this is why local testing is important for some of these things, because migration's going to be scary in your database. You don't want to screw up your database because it's a pain to get back to a healthy state. Hope you have backups. I recently learned that I didn't and had to start scheduling regular nightly backups. So check your backups, make everything works, but hopefully you check stuff out before you even get to that point. So we've got our migration file. It's well formatted at this point. I think it does everything we want it to. It's time to test it out, make sure it works. So let's say manage, migrate. It's going to apply migration number 2. And the logical steps are as follows. It will add the new column. It will allow it to be none. It will run this chunk of Python that fills in all the none operations with actual values. And then the third thing it's going to do is then lock down that field so that it can no longer be none. And we could probably check out, actually, before we run that, we can run out the SQL migrate command. And the SQL migrate command should tell us everything that is going to run. Now I've got my local stuff set up to use SQLite, so they're going to be SQLite kind of operations, but it gives you the database operations that would run. And with some comments. So it's telling me there's some raw Python in the middle here, but you can see the before and after operations, and it's altering in the table, creating some indices. And then, as you can see with the DDL, so DDL, if you don't know it, is data definition language. It's a fancy way of saying here are the operations that actually modify your actual table state and like the columns that you have and all of that stuff. Whereas something like select statements and insert statements, those are not data definition. They are just modifying the actual data that exists on that existing table. So this first set of stuff is creating the table, and when we get to, where is it? One of these should be a UUID. My eye is not seeing it. Well, that's weird. It's at least down here. I don't know why I'm not seeing the UUID up here. Where's my... There it is. Okay. Couldn't see it. So it's saying it's a UUID field. It's a car field of 32. And the important part here is it's null. So it's going to allow for null. And then down below, we get down to a... now this is SQLite. So what SQLite is actually doing, I believe, is like... I think under the covers, it creates a table, and then if you change a table, it creates a new table and like copies stuff over or something like that. But Postgres doesn't do that. It doesn't actually, I don't think it creates like brand new tables. So we're looking at stuff that's very SQLite specific. But I'm trying to show that in the new table, somewhere in here, there's a UUID, but this time it will not be, it's set to not null. So you can see the two operations do that. Right. That was kind of like bonus points, I guess, but still useful to see. So now we can say migrate. And so it ran all of that code, including the Python code that we wrote. And Python code passed because it wasn't very complicated. We can go back to our manage shell. This time I'm going to do shell plus, so it gets all the models, so we don't have to do the import ourselves. And we can do from for e in enrollment dot objects dot all, and we'll print e dot uuid. And if with any luck, each of these should be unique this time. And hooray, they are. Okay, so there's the real thing to get uuids. I totally did not anticipate doing database stuff tonight, but such is life. And maybe we want to, trying to think of if I want to add like test code for this too. Well, we're done with the migration. Let's go to the students, and the students models file, test models file. And I guess what we're really doing, I want to check that that there is a default. So let's go to test enrollment, and we want to assert that the enrollment uuid is not none. It's probably overkill to test this, but it just gives me a little peace of mind that the default is in fact creating a new uuid for every enrollment that's created, because that's what the factory is doing. It's creating new records that it puts in the database. Okay. So we have got our change, which just didn't turn out to be that much code. It actually mostly ended up here in the migration. But if you are new to doing migration stuff and more complicated stuff on existing models, here's a good example of things you could do to safely add a new field to your database table. Let's commit that. And Black is reformatting some stuff. We'll say add enrollment uuid. And I'm going to deploy that while we think about get back to the change that we're actually interested in making. So now that we have this going, what I'll do is bring up a new tab, and then we're going to pop from the git stash. So that brings us to here. It's not going to impact the deploy at all, because the Heroku deploy is working from a particular git SHA, so we're totally safe to do what we need to do here. And we can, at this point, return to our test file. Okay, so now the test that I thought was going to fail for a totally different reason, we can return to, because now it should have a uuid. Okay, we're finally getting the anticipated failure. The anticipated failure was that we haven't made this URL yet, which is no surprise. So let's come in here and create a new path that is going to be the path that we want. So what you can't see from this is where this is included in the parent URLs file. This is all rooted under schools, I believe. So a path to this is going to look like schools, reports, progress, looking at the 10 lines above, and then some uuid, and then student, and then another uuid. So that's the path that goes with this right here. And what I'm saying, what we're going to do is we're going to actually drop everything from here on, and we're going to have attendance like this. This is the pattern that we're going to go for in this new setup, because we're going to depend on the enrollment uuid. So I'm going to take, whoops, I deleted the wrong thing. I'm going to take this resources thing, and we can put this alphabetically. It doesn't really matter, but I'll do that. And we'll say attendance. And am I spelling that right? I'm pretty sure I am, but that would be embarrassing if I have a school application and I'm spelling attendance wrong. Yeah, attendance. I get confused if it's an A or an E there. Okay. Ignore my inability to spell. And then we can delete the rest to the line here, and we'll call it the attendance report. And then we can change this to the attendance report view. Whoops. Okay, so that's not going to exist yet. So Vim is going to complain at me. It knows, but it's still going to be enough to we can run the test, and now we won't get a URL failure. We'll just get an import failure because that model, that actual view file doesn't exist yet. We'll return here and come to the resource report, copy it because it's mostly what we want, and say attendance report. And while we're at it, I will change the template name. Looks like the deploy worked. Let's check on it. Site's still up. I'm going to go into secret mode for just a minute. I'm going to actually go to the office area. I don't think there's anything that will immediately show to you, but I don't want to expose actual customer information here. I just want to check on the enrollments and do a spot check on what shows up. Oh yeah, that would have been bad. You would have seen all sorts of data about actual users, and that would be embarrassing, to say the least. Not to mention potential breach in security, or it's kids and stuff, right? I don't want to share that information. So thankfully secrets work. Okay. And probably a lesson to me of don't do that in the future, because I can goof and I don't actually want to get anybody's data leaked out. So here we are. We've got this new attendance report, and it's doing a bunch of stuff right now. But this should be enough to make the test pass, this particular test, because what this one is doing is checking, are you authorized to get here? And if you're not an authorized user, then no, you shouldn't be allowed to get here. And that's really what it's testing for, is the login required mix-in place as it's supposed to be, and it is. So the next thing to do is now go to this primary test for a get, and here's where you can see I already had this pattern of I needed to use an enrollment, so my tests were already using it. So what we care about here is, for the moment, just the enrollment, and it's already hooked up to the right user. So there's a long path. Again, it gets back to that tree that I was showing earlier, where the enrollment is like a leaf in the tree, and it eventually gets up to the school. So we have to make sure to connect those to get the right access request. And so then we want to do attendance. But now we can simplify all this stuff. Instead of doing school year, UUID, and all this junk, we can just say UUID and be done with it. And that's it. It should condense down to a single line. And for the moment, we don't even need to do any assertions on context, because we don't care about it. Now, this is going to fail because, well, if I ran it right now, it would fail. Yeah, let's run it anyway. So let's comment out all this stuff that almost certainly, well, some of it we might need, but not yet. But this will still fail for a different reason. It's going to fail because there's no template. So we need to go get the template and put it in place, and then we can return to this. We'll do the resource report template as where we'll copy from. I think that's a good enough starting point. And we'll create the attendance report here. And paste all that in. I don't remember what's in this report. If there's a certain URL file, it might actually break the test. But we'll see. Nope. Okay. There's nothing in the template that's breaking rendering. There's probably a bunch of gaps that are missing, but nothing that's broken. Okay. And for the time being, we don't need the template. It's not really what we're after. So we've got a passing test. And we want to make sure still that you cannot, this still needs to be true. A user cannot access, but this time we'll say an attendance report. So the way that the way that we check this constraint is that notice that this big complicated thing that has to go into the enrollment factory to actually link them together, this one doesn't have that. So that will be the guard. And this is going to fail right now because there's actually nothing. I've ignored all the code. I've commented out the code. So this is actually going to return a 200 rather than a 404, which is not good. That's not what we want. We want to make sure that people can only access what they are supposed to access. So this will be like one of our first bits of context that we'll need to check. Let's try running this test and it should fail. Yeah, return a 200 instead of 404. Okay, so now we can do the attendance report. And what we want to do is this chunk of code right here. And for the moment, what are we going to need out of here? So as we're displaying this page, we're definitely going to need to display the student's name. We're also going to want to display the students, the grade level that they're in. And we're going to want to display the school year. So all of those select relateds are still true. So that's the query set part that we want. And now we need to tell getObject404, what are you actually going to query on? So this is where we greatly get to simplify from the previous version of this, is we don't need to check against two pieces of information. We need to check just against a single piece. But this line right here is absolutely critical. If I didn't have this line that says, does this user own the school year, then anybody, I mean, it'd be hard because it would require finding a unique UUID, but anybody could access this particular page, which is not good. So we can ditch that line, and we have simplified the query. For the moment, we don't need the enrollment, but we will in a minute. So I'm going to let that Vim error stand. So now that should 404, hopefully, telling us that we've got the right protection in place. So that's just a quirk of my particular project. If you are doing access control yourself, there are other tools that you can use, and I've looked at some of them. One of them that comes to mind, I think, is called Django Guardian. It's a permission system. And yeah, so you can go read about that. There is another one that was super interesting to me that I have not researched recently. Maybe it's on Django packages. This is a good resource for you if you've never used it. Django packages. Let's see if we can find permissions, if that's a category. There was a new-ish service. It's pretty cool. And it's not showing up in here. Man, I'm not going to be able to think of the name. Bummer. Okay. How about versus? I think it felt like it wasn't Oslo. That's not the city in Norway. Man. It was a permission model that allows you to do like authentication checks and doing some really specific definitions of who should have access control to what, and it allowed it had a domain specific language. I'm bummed that I can't think of it. I've seen it like mentioned on the Django newsletter, I think, and the Talk Python to me. I'm gonna find this thing. It's gonna bug me. I don't know how far away, how long ago it was though. Oso, I was so close. Well, here it is. Oso, whoops. OS, Django, OSO. Yeah, here you go. So if you have like more advanced security stuff than I do, you might be interested in this. But essentially, it allows you to define like policies that you might want to use. Maybe they have a good example here. But you define how people are supposed to access your stuff in one area. I'm not going to find this quickly, probably. And then, is it in here? Yeah, sorry y'all. I don't know where this is, but you go check out this project. It's pretty interesting, and it allows you to, maybe their main site has it. Okay, grief, y'all. This is to the people that run the Oso project. You should have like a chunk of code like on the front page. Shouldn't have to click into anything, so that people can get a feel for it. Yeah, so you use their like domain specific language, which I think is based off of, it's not Fortran. Oh shoot, what's the Forth? No. Anyway, a popular, an older language, but a popular language that is based on constraints and stuff. And it allows you to set up these policies that you can kind of chain together in pretty interesting ways. Seems like a pretty cool service. I don't actually know a whole ton about it, but I thought it was interesting when I saw it. But my scheme that I have on my particular project doesn't have any of this stuff, and I'm probably could be way more advanced and probably could save on a lot of code, I would guess, if I used one of these things. But I've been fairly happy with the kind of just do a foreign key relationship lookup and find the common parent element, and that's been good enough for me for now. So if we get back to this thing, we can see we should have 3 passing tests. And what is that? We've checked that you have to be logged in. You have to actually have a real enrollment that you have access to, and then you can't access somebody else's enrollment. So that's really good to have. The rest of this that we need is, well, frankly, a bunch of stuff that's already here in this other view. So we need the grade level and the school year and the student. Those are all pieces of data that we want. So those are good to have, and we can actually pull the same things from this previous test and put it right there. So that should still pass. Yeah, that's good. And then what else do we need here? There's something we're gonna have to loop over the dates of the school year, and we'll do that in a minute. I think probably what I want to do is hook up the user interface so that we have a place to click into. And so the first thing I think before we move any farther is to go to the reports index page. And here we want to change some stuff. I want to change a bunch of stuff actually. So we can launch the site again, return to the reports index page, and refresh. Sorry, so we're back to this working. And this page is apparently all, it's using a flex box, and the width is equal amongst 1/5. But as I said earlier, I want to ditch this report label for both of them. So that should simplify those. And I think we're up against the edge of what the fifths is going to do. So we can try changing it to sixth and see if everything still fits. It may not, although it may. I think we have some room here. So I'm going to change all of these to be sixth and add a new one that I'll call attendance. I think I probably actually want to put the attendance report above, like the resource report. Resources is like, probably in my opinion, less useful than knowing if you have a state requirement. Well, I actually don't know. I think there's actually state requirements to show how often is your kid actually here. And also some states, I think, including my state, I believe has like, what are you actually using to teach your child for what you report to your government. So here we go. That kind of gets the header. And if we refresh this, is going to be wonky now. So we've got the header lined up. Those are all appropriate, but now we need to fix up the actual body of the table because it's not really a table. It's a phony table. So let's change this to sixths for all of those and that. And then for the first step, we're going to just duplicate a row. So let's take the resource report div and paste it again. And that should give us the extra columns. Now, if your eye is like my eye, you're like, what the heck? So I think maybe with the previous stuff, this view, I probably said to center it or to align it to the right, perhaps. Actually, that looks pretty right aligned. And that's just no good. Certainly not going to work anymore. Yeah, look at that. Or it has a bunch of space in front of it. What am I doing? Yep, I gave it a bunch of padding because I had it, probably because it looked okay with the fifth, but now we need to change that. We need to get rid of that for sure because it just looks weird at this point. So we'll go to the end and we'll drop off this padding on all three. And what that'll do is pull it over so that all of those things align with the report part. And from a UI perspective, this looks pretty good. I think it captures everything. I think most student names will fit in, although my kids, those are my kids' names, and my kids' names are pretty short. And my last name is not super long. So I actually don't know if that would work on someone with a much longer name than my own. Yeah, you can think of people in your life or in your community that have very long names, and I don't know if that would like wrap around. It would wrap around to have a taller name. But how much space do we really have? Actually, I think we can fake this. We can fake it with if you go to the console and you say what do you have to say? Window, body, no. Document, body, and then editable? Content editable? Yeah. So check this. This is a pretty cool little trick. If you say that content editable and then you say that's equal to true, now if I click anywhere, then I can edit the text as is. It's a pretty weird little trick, but so let's try my name, Matthew. Okay, so that still fits, and layman stir. I don't know. I'm just making up a last name here. So it's less ideal. So, and I don't know that I want to space it out so much to make that fit perfectly. What else could we do? Like I could fiddle with the grid to give the student name area more space, but then I think what's going to happen is that it might just look awkward. Like this one could be way wider than the others, and you might be like, why? Because I feel like all three of these need to be uniform, and I don't think they're going to fit into, say, a 12th. Right now they're in a 6th, so I'd cut them in half. And so what's going to happen is I'm picking 12 specifically because if you think about the Tailwind has a grid system, and the grid system works by there's a width of that you can say half, you can say third, you can say fourth, you can say 5th, 6th, and I think you can do 8ths and 12ths. I think 12 is, I want to say 12 is the most granular. I don't think I need to go any more granular than that. But if I went to the most granular viewpoint of like, let me carve this up in 12 segments and said that this is 1/12th, well, that works. I might be able to get this view label in here in a 12th because I kind of have half the space. I can see that fitting, but it's going to cut right into the actual titles. So I can't cut those, and I need all of those to be uniform. So those need to stay at probably the minimum unit I could use then is then 2/12. So that's what they are right now. They're 1/6. So that part's not going to change, which means that the only room that I have left to play with are, could I change any of these to be different? And all of the labels at here wouldn't fit into a 12th. So the only other option that I have is to make the table itself wider. And I don't know, we could do that quickly. What does it look like? If we inspect and come up to here and change it to 4XL. Okay, now we're suddenly in something bigger, and that fits better. I don't know, let me think on that for a second. So that I got a significantly longer last name in there, which might accommodate the average user. So, I recognize that my family has a short 6-letter last name, and that I don't actually know what the average is going to be. I wonder if we can search for that. Average length of last name. Google's pretty amazing sometimes. They call it surname. Sure. 5 to 7. So I'm actually 6 is right in smack dab in the middle. So that tells me that back on our page that 6, 7 is the 53%, and like this is probably bell curve right here. Some people might have super short, some people fall squarely where I am, some people are a little bit more. So this example that I've changed it of Matthew Laymanster here is probably pretty accurate for a reasonable max length name. Now, I wonder if average length of first name. 6. Okay. So yeah, I do feel like that's pretty representative. And I can fit that on one line. So that makes me feel good to change this to 4 instead of 3 and just call it done and not really think too much about the grid. Let's refresh this page, see what it looks like with this new sizing, and brings my shorter names back in. But yeah, And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to rethink this page. Like if, for now, these are the only reports that people have expressed interest in. But I don't really know what I want to do if there's a fourth report. I probably need to rethink this whole chunk of user interface and say, make it like a block of here are things. The page would be much, much bigger. I don't think it'd be fit in quite this tight, concise table like it does. Okay, but before we can move on, we need to actually, like right now, this is still linking to the resource report, which is not correct. So we need to come down to the template area and go to this middle one, this resource, and change it to attendance. And then change the argument to be uuid. And that's it. Yeah, I'm even kind of being bad and I don't have a title on those SVGs, which I probably should. Well, get to it someday. So we're going to click in and refresh this page. And now when I hover over this, if you look in the bottom of my browser, hopefully you can see that in the bottom left, it says reports, attendance, and then a uuid, a single uuid. And that's what we want. Let's click this link, and we've got this is our other template. So this is lying. It's not actually the resource report, but it's got all the right stuff in here, which is good. It's a good starting point. We can come back to the template, and we can say, I think one of the things that I put in the issue was to call this the attendance report. Yeah, this is what I told the customer. So we're going to call it attendance report for John Smith in second grade, and for blah blah blah. So it's pretty close to that because I say in instead of for. So whoops. Attendance report. Did I save it? What? Oh, that was in. Oh, yeah. I'm modifying it in the title, but there's also an H1. So I could see it in the title tab that you can't actually see right now, but we need to modify it here too. Okay, great. So this is the title bit, and the next thing that we want is our actual dates. That's the whole thing to display. So the format of this, let's look at some other options and see what we've got. So the progress report kind of has one format. I think the resource report has a slightly different one. Let's check them out. The progress report has a very simple table look to it, split up by courses with all the tasks and scores and averages and stuff. The resource report has an even simpler format, and I think this is going to be what I'm looking for. So we aren't going to need a H2 tag on this page. It's going to be, I don't know, the date and then like the status or attended. I don't even know what to call the other thing. I don't even know if we need to like put a header on it. Like could just be here are your dates and here's whether you attended or not. Yeah. So let's try that. Let's go ahead and come into the attendance report. I'm going to delete all of this stuff. No, I'm not. That would be dumb because this is a lot of markup that we're going to need. I'm going to do what? Well, I know that we can, they're always going to be school year dates. Like at minimum, I think a school year says like you have to have a different start and end date. So there's going to at least be 2 dates to show in this table. There will always be some level of values here. So the bottom of this, where we're showing this extra image, there's no courses to show, none of that's going to apply because it's going to always have data. So we can get rid of this whole chunk of that end if, and we can also get rid of this. We don't have any resources right now. So the regroup, I don't know, yeah, it's just going to show nothing. So that's not what we're looking for. But what we are looking for is what? We don't even need a complicated for loop. So the regroup tag is a really cool template tag that you can go look at, and what it will do is it'll take a list and it will split it out into like dictionaries, and the dictionary, like it'll be a list of things that have a maybe it's a list of tuples, I don't remember, but the first item will be the thing that you wanted to group by, and the second thing will be all the items that had that. But that's not what we need here. What we need is dates, and we don't need this tag at all. So we can really simplify a lot of this by saying there's already a template tag called called date, or a filter called date. So I don't want to, I think if I did date, it's going to highlight funny. Yeah, it's going to highlight like that. So we're going to call it school date as what we're going to put in here. And we'll say that the thing that we're going to expect in the context is the school dates. And now this is where we probably have some freedom in what we're going to put in here. I did tell the user that it has to start from the start of the school year. That makes total sense. I also said that it would be useful, because it doesn't make sense to show, we're in March and this typical US school year that, crosses and starts in the fall and ends at early summer or late spring. It doesn't make sense to show April and May and June if it goes that far right now, because that's not where they are in the school year. So what I told the user is we'll either go to the end date of the school year if the school year is done, or we'll go to the current date, whichever one comes first. So that if she has to print it out for her records after the first quarter, after the second quarter, that she can say, like, here it is as of this time, and none of the future stuff matters. So what I want to do is include that. And the thing that I was thinking about, do I want to include the weekends? Like, is that going to be useful, or is that going to be distracting? Is it going to be a waste? It just seems like from a completeness perspective that might be useful, but I could see an argument that says, like, actually, I don't need that. So I think for now, I will probably include it until somebody says, like, hey, why are you showing these weekends? I don't need those. That's not useful. Please don't show those. But yeah, better to be complete. And it's actually, frankly, easier too, because if I'm not skipping those dates, I don't have to put in any special logic. I can just say, like, this is a date. We're going to always do the date. And yeah, that should make it easier. So coming through on the actual thing to loop over, we have, really, what do we have? We've got, we don't need a bunch of this stuff, I think. We can get away with, yeah, we don't need this outer loop. This outer loop's actually not helpful, because really it's the inner loop that was useful before. And we're not, like I said, we're not going to have an H2. We're going to have a table, and I'm going to render this, and it's not going to look right, because it's going to show like this information at the top that we don't need. So I think we can actually even get rid of this flex row as well. Trying to think of, so it's doing border top, which is annoying. So there's going to be, we can probably flip that though. Okay. So now we've got down to the like simplest possible template that I could devise. We have school dates. or a school date in school dates, but none of that exists yet. Okay, cool. And it's dividing this in 2/6 and 4/6. I don't know that they will even need that structure, but we don't have anything to loop over yet, so we will get some. We'll populate this data first, and then fill it in. Okay, so I'm ready to set the template aside for a minute, or we might return to it pretty quickly, but I don't know. We'll go back to the school year, and here's where we want to. So what we really need to do is put in the context the school dates. But what is that value going to be? So I'm going to create a method because I don't need to muddy this context data method any more than it already is. And we'll say build school dates, and we can pass in, I don't know, passing in the enrollment's probably sufficient because we can get access to everything we need. Because we're going to have to query more data later, I think. And I don't need this other chunk of code. So we've got build school dates, takes a self argument, it's going to take an enrollment, and we need to return a list of something. That's one thing that's true for sure. It's going to return a list, so we'll return the empty list of school dates. And Vim is complaining because I don't have the type annotation on that stuff yet. That's okay. So I know that I've already got code in here that makes it smart enough so that you can never have the school year's start date and end date flipped. And there is always an end date. It's not possible to not set one. So without fear of getting into some infinite loop, I can say start at the start date, add to the school dates of the date of that day, and then increment until you get to the end date and just have all of that stuff. So we will do that. Let's go, let's take the start date and the end date. So we'll say start, we'll just extract them locally. In fact, this is going to be our kind of our pointer thing that we go over. So we'll have the school date is going to start at the enrollment. The next thing is the grade level. So we just have to navigate into the school year and get out the thing. In fact, I'm pretty sure we're gonna come back to the school year over and over again. So let's go ahead and put the school year in a local variable. So enrollment, grade level, school year, and then we'll say school year dot start date is the first thing that we want, and that is an actual date instance. And then we will do while school date is less than or equal to the school year end date. Then we want to append the school date. So right now this would generate an infinite loop, which would be bad. So and take up a ton of memory because we're appending to a list forever. That would be really bad. So we'll say school date. So if I stopped here, bad news bears. But what we can do is we can say school date plus equal date time delta of 1 day. So hopefully that logic is fairly self-evident of what's happening, is that it's going to add a day to the date, and because I already know the model constraints and can trust that part of the school year is not going to change, there will always be a start date and there will always be an end date, and we are going to have a limited number here of whatever that limit is. And so we need to import date time apparently, because that's missing, but that's an easy thing to add. And now we should have a list of dates. Okay, so I am going to come back to this template earlier than I thought, but and the reason to come back to it is we want to, what do I want to do? We don't have resources, so that's not going to be a thing, but we can replace this with school date. Right now, the school date is an actual date object, so that's probably not what we want, frankly. Okay, let's do one more modification here. And we'll come back to the test later. Instead of appending directly the school date, let's do a dictionary. And we'll say date. Because there's going to be other information that we want to attach to each of these school dates. So it's going to be like, was there a break today? Was there, did the student actually attend today? Like that's the kind of information that's going to go in this thing that we're iterating over. And so by fixing that up, now we can say, now we can do what I actually intended to do, which is say school date. And for this first version, we'll just say .date. It's doing that weird formatting again. It's a template filter, and the filtering system is not smart enough to know that I'm actually using it as a variable. Maybe I'll just live with it. And we'll delete out of that tag. Okay, so now we should have enough in our template to see this print out every day in the default formatting. And there it is. I have generally, and you can see it starts at whatever this is, January 15th, 2020, and extends all the way to April 1st. It's like the school year from hell. It just goes on forever. But I think it gets the idea across, as I make a mess with my water, that we get all of our dates in here. And it gets all the dates in here whether or not they are actually part of the school year. So this is where we can move on to the next thing. And we have the date in here, and what is next? What do we want to display next? And first thing I think I want to do is I need to turn off flux for a minute, so I actually can see this, because the yellow at this time of night for me doesn't actually show. You probably all see this just fine, but I don't. And so there's this dotted line thing that's on there. And normally this looks fine with the way it is, because there's usually a kind of a header above this. But because there's no header here, this looks a little, well, maybe it looks okay. Let me think on this. Let's try it without and move this down and see if it looks strange. But actually, because the H1 is up top here, maybe this is okay. I'm not sure. Both of them might stink in some way, but we'll check. So we'll just change border T to border B. The problem is when we get to the bottom of the report, so this moves it down, kind of fixed that. But if you go to the bottom now, the last row has this extra line, which looks a little silly. Right, let's keep it on the top, because I think what's going to end up happening anyway is we might end up putting some header, some kind of table labels that we saw on the resource report. Okay, so next though, what's going to go in each cell? And first thing to do is make this thing smaller. We don't need this to be a max 2XL. We probably don't even need it to be at XL. Let's try to switch it down to a large. That brings it in, because I want the text to reasonably fit in the width of the table, or look okay, and we just don't need all that extra space. The other thing I want to do is change the format. So this is where we're going to switch to using we're actually going to use the date format filter. That's why it looks weird. It's because I've got both of them are highlighting in that kind of light teal or whatever that is. So you put it in the format filter, and then you say, I think it's year YMD, I believe is what the format that I've used. Let's search, see if we can find, make sure that that's consistent. Yeah, that's the one I've been using. So that just puts the year first, and then the month, and then the date. And it just keeps a style that matches the rest of the site that is totally unambiguous and uniform is the other important aspect of it, that are fairly uniform. I guess it's not a fixed width font, but most of the numbers are roughly the same width. There are certainly exceptions, like you can see the 01 and the 8 doesn't quite line up, but it's close enough. What else to note about this thing? So this is where I'm also torn of like, do I want to, let me just throw something up here, see how it looks. So let's change this to a 2 for a minute, and Django built-in template tags. Go to date. Come on. There's a bunch of settings here. So there's the day of the week, the long form with an L. So what I'm wondering is, what would it look like if I just used that too, and then showed that on the report? And I'm thinking a little bit longer term here. Like if I include this date, it might help make sense of why is there no school on, like if I'm going to include a label that says no school scheduled, and they're going to see a pattern of a couple of days off, and this is where I was thinking maybe including the date might help, but it's starting to seem a little weird. So I'll keep it simple, and then if a customer actually says they want that, then I'll return to it. There we go. Let the customer decide. So we're gonna do 3 and 3. Probably don't even need to do that, but now we want to say, now we want to actually put data into the actual list of school dates. And so this is where we can say there's a method that I have that says that checks whether the current date that's being provided is a day that the school year runs. So I've made it configurable on the site. If you can have a school year that runs on any number of days you want. So if you wanted to run 7 days a week, more power to you. If you have a school year and you're like have a kindergartner who's only doing 3 days a week or something like that, then you could set your school year to be just the 3 days a week. That's very possible. So that's a method that I've added to the school year model that I can check. So what we can do is come down into this while method, and we can add that as a query. And I'm going to just say, what should I say? Well, I'm going to use it in terms that make sense to me, because this is what the method is called. It's called runs on. So that's going to be a Boolean, and we can say the school year runs on, and then provide the school date. And hopefully that's pretty clear to you what that does. If it's not, stick with me and you'll see it in a second. And so we say, now we can do if the school date runs on. Maybe I might adjust that because it doesn't read very well. Yeah, I don't like that. What's a better name? How about this? I like this better. Is school day. That seems, school date is school day. That seems way better. Then we can do an else here. So no school scheduled. I think that's what I told the customer I was going to do. Oh, that was for break days. How about not a school day? Feels a little weird. But what we're going to see, hey, is here are the weekends. They're popping up here. I think this report looks ridiculous right now, but it's getting a little closer. So let's change this to be not gigantic. Change it to be a medium. That brings that aspect in. And then I don't think we need this to be so big. We can say, change it to a 2 and make that a 4 to like consume the rest. How does that feel? Feels okay. Yeah, I'll do that for now. So that's like the first check, is the first level of this, is we don't even need to check if the student is on that day. We just need to, see if it's a real school day or not. So the next thing that we want to do is check if it's a break day. So there's a notion of like the way I've captured holidays in School Desk is as just a generic break day, as a school break model. And again, on the school year, I have this method that I believe I call isBreak. Yeah. So you give it the date, and it checks that if it's a break or not. And so under the covers, what that's doing is breaks are represented as a table, and the school year instance will cache all of the breaks. It'll do one query that says, what are all the breaks for the school year, and put that in a dictionary, which is this school breaks by date thing. And if it finds it in there, that can say, yeah, this is in fact a break. So it does that is not none check. But I can use that to our advantage here in this dictionary. So then we can say the next thing we want to do is say so afterwards a school day, we can move to the end, and now we can say is break, and that will be school year is break with the school date. So that's the next bit of information. So you can start to see that this data structure is getting richer, which is what we want, and it's calculating all the stuff that the template's going to need. And so the template's doing a tiny bit of logic here, which I think is okay. We're not doing any like real calculation though. This is all pre-computed values. And so now we can say in here that, if this is a school day, or maybe breaks even override school days, or this notion of the weekend. Because if you're going on a holiday vacation, if you're going on a vacation and you're gone for a week, the way I've got breaks scheduled is that they will span the time. Actually, let's see if we can see it on the calendar. Show all the months. So here's an example of one right here. Yeah. So October, I did a bunch of boundary checking on this, and here's an example of a break that spans from October 30th of last year to November 2nd of last year. and it covers a Saturday and a Sunday. So I think it's important on the actual report to put that above the actual is school day check. So we want to change this to an elif, and then we'll change this to be the break day is going to be the first thing to check for. Are you a break day? Because then you want to show something else. So school day is break. Whoops, that got funky formatting. Is break. And I think that's when I told the no school scheduled for this date. That's what I told the user I would put in there. And that's going to distinguish between breaks and actual school days. So if we jump down to November or the end of October, that's where we're going to see this example. No school scheduled for this date. Cool. And that fits in well. Like, this is what I'm concerned about, is like I want to make sure that that everything fits properly, that there's no like weird wrapping, that I can use these longer terms, but it not be too long. Yeah, and then I'm afraid this can be the problem, is that like if I just say, for the moment, let's just assume every day is a day that the student attended. The student has perfect attendance. And this would be a perfect school year. And maybe this is good. I don't know. Yeah. And I didn't think to ask the customer what, well, okay, I did say attended. So that's what we're going to use for that. There is like, so it's, I guess we're attended versus absent. Probably the things that we need to say. And so it's going to be like, if school date attended, that's what we want, that, else we want absent. So it's going to flip the whole thing. This is like the worst student ever that never showed up for anything. Absent all the time. I can totally anticipate that the very next thing that the customer is going to say is I need some sort of tally of at the bottom of here are all of my dates. The other thing I'm noticing is that we're not actually stopping at the current date. So we need to do that. So let's do that now while I'm thinking about it. So this school year actually ends on, does it end on April 1st, really? So I'm about to be at the end of the school year again. Oh shoot, yeah, tomorrow. I'm running out of real estate for these school years because I have a limit on how many days they can include. Although I think I said something close to like 500, so we might actually have more space. Eventually, I'll need to make a new school year to test out. But we can say down in here, we need to say the minimum. So the end date is going to be the minimum between the school year end date and today, which we don't have yet. So we can get today from, I'm gonna have to pass it in. No, we don't. We can get it from, yeah, we've got access to it. So today is the self request user local get, what do I call it? There's a method that I have that gets the date. So let's look at the user model file. Get local today. Okay. so now we can change this here. And now if we go back to the attendance report, it should say it should only include the 31st. Cool. All right. So it's not the most thrilling report, but I think it's what it does do is makes the government happy. And sometimes you just got to make the government happy. What do we have left? We need to do, and I think this is, I'm going to have to call it. My brain is starting to get fried. I've been going for nearly 2 hours. We need to do the attended attribute. So create attended attribute. And I might do that on the next stream. I don't really know. I would like to actually probably do this before the next stream because I would love to be able to share with this customer that I put in their request. This is like a brand new person. I want to ride the wave of enthusiasm because they seem to be pretty excited about the product, and it'd be nice to delight them. So let me just talk through like what that attended attribute is going to be. Every student has a set of things that they have to do every day. We can look at the week, and there's all these tasks, right? I checked with them and asked, what is going to be attended? And if the student has completed any task on a day that the school year runs, then that's going to be marked as an attendance for that day. So there might be some edge cases that pop up in here. Like, what happens if for some reason you don't have any schoolwork scheduled for a day at all, and there's, even if the student was in place, there's nothing for them to do? Well, one could argue that is absent too, but I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. I think I'm just going to take the naive approach until somebody says, hey, I need this to work, and here's my scenario, because I don't want to try and guess on all this stuff. So what I need to do is every task has associated with it, whenever a student completes it, a coursework. So I can essentially take all of the coursework for the whole year from any course and go through that list of coursework and make a dictionary out of it. And the dictionary is a big, gigantic truth table. And the keys of the truth table will be a date, and the value of the truth table will just be true or false. You either attended, or you did something that day, or you didn't. So I will go through the entire list. In fact, I don't even need to make the false. I just need to make, oh, this is even better. So it doesn't need to be a truth table at all, because there's no real reason for that. I need a set of dates of student did something on these dates. That's it. And the reason you can use a set is it actually makes the lookup times really fast. You would not want to do this with a Python list. So if I got, let's actually maybe sketch this out really quickly before we end. So the coursework model. So we could say for coursework in coursework dot objects dot, some filter that includes the student. Okay, this is just a sketch. It's not the actual code. And in fact, you could probably get really close to this with an operation like a values list. Yeah, totally. So coursework, object filter, and then we'd filter on the student and the actual school year, and we'd say values list. And one of the things that's part of that model with that class is the completed date. Okay, so that's a required field. So we could say values list of completed date, and we could say flat equal to true. So that's going to give back a list of the dates. So here's where we want to wrap that in, we'll call it dates with work. And that can be a set on this operation, something like this. And then the attended attribute is a test of, is the school date in dates with work? You know, I'm so close that I might as well just do it. I didn't think I was going to do it, but it turned out to be way easier than I thought. So we have the enrollment. So we need what goes in the class coursework. We need the student, and okay, it does get a little bit harder, but not so hard that it's unbearable. We don't want all the students' coursework from all time. Like if this software is around for 20 years and my children go all the way through high school, then that's many years of school. And I hope they graduate more than 20 years. Anyway, so what we want to check though is that we want to narrow the scope of the coursework to what is the coursework for this particular school year. So we have to go through the course task model, which has a connection to a course, and courses can be, there's a many-to-many relationship with grade levels. So we want to go to check the grade levels, and we want to say, this is a filter. So we want to say in, and then a list that includes the enrollment grade level. I think that's going to be right. Okay, and then enrollment student. So that might actually be it. I didn't anticipate it being that easy, but hey, I'll take it. So this is going to give us the dates for all the coursework, and this should actually be what I hope it would be. Hope it to be. So a lot of attended, and then some absent, and then at the end should be just a bunch of absent because I haven't been filling in a lot of stuff for a long time. Well, look at that. Attended and absent with a bunch of absent. That is awesome. It was worth spending the extra few minutes thinking about it. So we've got all this data here, and what I'm not doing here, this was all intended to be like what I thought was going to be basically a sketch of this, but I ended up just knocking it all out. What is missing and critical, and what I will not be streaming, is the actual test code for this. Like, there's a bunch of spots to test about. I want to test, do break days show up? Am I capturing those correctly? Am I capturing school days correctly? Am I capturing when something was attended versus not attended? Am I capturing, does this go to the end of a school year versus the current date? So there's probably 4, 5, 6 different unit tests in here that I need to write just to make sure that this particular helper method is well covered for the context that it's building up. But I think the surprising part is that the actual report itself is like pretty darn close to done. I might do one more thing. Let's just see what happens if we knock it down to small instead of medium. I don't know if that might be too small to get away with it. Gets pretty tight on that no school scheduled. Well, what if we just drop no school scheduled or for this date? For this date is kind of implied. It's sort of dumb to say for this date. So if we do that, and then instead of 2 and 6, if we said 3 and 3, and I know I could do 1/2, but sometimes it's easier to keep that, then we get this format, which looks pretty good. And I want to keep this left aligned. I don't want to like center all this. I think that would look weird. But what if we try text center on that flex box? Kind of pulls it away. It was feeling kind of tight against the edge there. So yeah, it's feeling pretty good. I think I'm pleased with it. I mean, as pleased as one can be with a boring table report, but I think this will make the customer happy. And that's what I'm really concerned about, because it's not necessarily the beauty of this report, it is what it represents. And that what it represents that I think is valuable is that the customer didn't have to do anything, didn't have to input anything. Like, I think there are other tools in this space where the customer has to say, I've marked this as attended today. And this is like automatic attendance calculation, which I think is pretty darn good, pretty darn cool. There's other stuff that I want to include in here as well that I haven't really talked about. So I mentioned that I want to do a blog post and announcement, which is something that my system supports. But I'm going to try and GitHub was formatting that funky, so I'm going to try and see if breaking it up with a paragraph will fix it. The other thing I want to do is write documentation. So I haven't really sold some of the benefits on the site, and it'd be good for SEO reasons and like just discovery from search engines and that kind of stuff, write what are the available reports on the platform, because unless people are actually doing a trial, they can't actually see that. So I need to kind of tell and advertise that for those that are more of a look before you leap kind of crowd. So those will be there. And then we'll do one more here, say write tests. And we can change this to, we got the feature done. Yay. So that's that. Okay, so thank you for joining in. This was it's quite a bit later than I thought because I had a rough start, but we got there, and we got a feature done from start to finish. We got migrations in. We did a whole lot tonight, so I appreciate that. For those of you that have been sticking around, it's been quiet on the chatter front, but hopefully you've been listening and hearing and learning something. I do take this content and post it up on YouTube. If you do happen to be catching this on YouTube and you've made it this far, please appreciate it. A thumbs up or a like or whatever it is that's over there. If they're still showing likes, and I know there's some rumor about at least showing dislikes, which anyway, the side note. But thanks again for joining in, and appreciate those that have followed along. So have a great night. Take care.